At first glance, it appears to be nothing more than a sphere of light suspended in the darkness. But if you pause the recording at just the right moment, something unexpected begins to emerge. The number 21, a band of strange markings, and in other frames, shapes that seem to resemble rooms, a window, or even something like a painting or an unfamiliar interior space. They could be reflections, they could be distortions. But what if we are not simply looking at something contained inside the orb? What if instead, we are looking through it? For a channel called Wormhole to Cosmos, that question was hard to ignore. This is not a subject we normally explore, but when I came across the story of Chris Bledsoe, and the luminous orbs he says have appeared around him for years, one recording stood out in particular.
Yeah, so the plane and the orb.
At approximately 21 seconds, the number 21 appears inside the orb alongside a distorted line of markings. A published analysis on Medium connected these details to several biblical passages and a broader theme involving authority, calling, and divine order. We will look at that interpretation and where it comes from. But while studying the recording frame by frame, I noticed something else. We selected several still images and used imaging software to gently reduce the circular distortion, unfolding the curved appearance into flatter views. And within those frames, I began to see forms that suggested interiors, perhaps a room, a window, or even something like a painting, or maybe something entirely different like a cave. This is only my interpretation. You may see something else entirely. But suppose a wormhole is not a long, spiraling tunnel through space. Suppose it is something simpler, more immediate, like a doorway. You open it, step through, and in an instant, you are somewhere else. If that were possible, could these images be hinting at what lies on the other side? To understand how we arrived at that question, we must begin with Chris Bledsoe. At the time, he was a husband, father, and home builder from North Carolina, facing one of the most difficult periods of his life, long before the Orbs brought widespread attention to his story. By early 2007, his business was struggling, his finances were collapsing, and he was living with a serious chronic illness. On January 8th, hoping for a brief escape, he went fishing on the Cape Fear River with his teenage son and 3 co-workers. He later said that he walked away alone, knelt beside the river, and prayed for help. Then he saw a brilliant reddish-orange sphere beyond the trees. More lights appeared, followed by missing time and an encounter that changed his life. The mystery followed him home. In the years afterward, he and his family reported and recorded luminous orbs near their property. His story attracted believers, skeptics, researchers, and people connected to scientific and government institutions. Some see a UFO phenomenon, others see something spiritual, or something ordinary. But everyone's mind works differently. If the phenomenon somehow responds to human thought or expectation, then what appeared to him may have taken a form he could recognize, while someone else might experience something completely different. That possibility makes one recording especially intriguing. At normal speed, it appears to show little more than a luminous sphere, but frame by frame, the image begins to tell a very different story. The recording appears simple at first, a luminous sphere moving against the darkness. But at approximately 21 seconds, something unusual becomes visible. Above a distorted band of markings is a shape that appears to resemble the number 21. A published analysis on Medium noticed an interesting coincidence. The number seemed to appear not only inside the orb, but at roughly the 21-second point in the recording. The author then compared chapter 21 across several books of the Bible and found a repeated theme involving power and authority. In 1 Kings 21 and 2 Kings 21, corrupt rulers face judgment. Proverbs 21:1 says, "The king's heart is in the hand of the Lord." In Matthew 21, true authority confronts false authority. And Revelation 21 describes the establishment of final divine rule. In the simplest terms, the author believed the number 21 could be acting as a marker, connecting different passages through one shared idea: where authority comes from, how it should be used, and what happens when it becomes corrupted. But the number was only the beginning. When the distorted markings were turned upside down, part of the line was interpreted as Rome 1:1. The author connected this with Romans 1:1, which reads, Paul, a servant of Jesus Christ, called to be an apostle, separated unto the gospel of God. That passage introduces Paul as a messenger who was called and given a purpose. Another section of the markings was tentatively read as D17CK. The analysis separated this into 3 parts: D for Deuteronomy, 17 for chapter 17, and CK as a possible abbreviation for choose king. Deuteronomy 17 explains how a king should be selected, places limits upon his power, and requires him to remain obedient to divine law. The article then adds one final connection. Strong's Hebrew reference H21 is associated there with the word Abai, meaning my father. Placed together, the proposed pattern becomes surprisingly consistent. A ruler is chosen, a messenger is called, power is placed under law, and ultimate authority returns to the Father. This does not prove that the markings were deliberately encoded. They are blurred, distorted, and open to more than one interpretation. But the connection is still fascinating, because whatever these markings may or may not mean, they were not the only unusual details hidden within those brief moments of footage. So we stopped the recording and began moving through it one frame at a time. That chain of references gives the markings one possible meaning, but it leaves a more immediate question unanswered. What are we actually seeing inside the orb? While the recording is moving, these details pass almost too quickly to notice, so I stopped it frame by frame and selected several still images for a closer look. Using imaging software, we gently reduced the circular distortion in each frame separately. The purpose was not to add objects, repaint details, or create something that was not already present. It was simply to remap the curved image into a flatter view. And when that curvature was reduced, some of the shapes became easier to examine. In certain frames, I began to see what looked like an interior space, dark walls, rectangular openings, and lines that seemed to recede into the distance. One shape reminded me of a window. Another looked almost like a painting hanging inside a room. Other frames suggested something entirely different, perhaps a church, the interior of a spacecraft, or even a cave or mine. But these are only visual impressions. The images are dark, blurred, and heavily distorted. Reflections, compression, and low light noise could all produce shapes that appear familiar, and different people may see completely different things. But one sequence of markings seemed different. It appeared to resemble a reference connected to an ancient text found near the Dead Sea. And that is where the story leads next. The possible reference was 1QSB. At first, that may look like nothing more than a random combination of numbers and letters, but within the study of the Dead Sea Scrolls, it has a very specific meaning. 1Q identifies Qumran Cave 1 near the Dead Sea. The letter S comes from Serek, a Hebrew word meaning rule or order, and the final B identifies the section known as the Rule of the Blessings, also catalogued as 1Q28b. This is not a book from a modern Bible. It is a fragmentary ancient Jewish text associated with the Dead Sea Scrolls and preserved in Hebrew. Its surviving opening speaks of blessings for those who fear God, follow His will, keep His commandments, and remain faithful to His covenant. Other surviving sections contain blessings connected with priests, religious leadership, and a future ruler known as the Prince of the Congregation. That makes the possible resemblance interesting. If this phenomenon interacts with people personally, then what appears may not be the same for everyone. A particular detail may reveal itself to one person for a reason, while someone else is drawn towards something entirely different. In this case, the path led to 1QSB and Qumran Cave 1. Whether that is coincidence or something more, that is where it led. This does not give us a final answer, and that may be the most honest place to leave it. It remains fascinating and raises more questions than answers. But before we finish, what do you see? Did anything stand out? A shape, a room, a word, or something completely different? What excites me most is the possibility that something we have always placed in science fiction or fantasy may actually be real. Imagine if an orb really could be a wormhole to cosmos, not a long tunnel through space, but a doorway. You step through, and instantly you are somewhere else. How incredible would that be? A universe filled with new worlds and possibilities, where good ultimately triumphs over evil. I believe we are moving toward a better and incredibly exciting future. Technology and artificial intelligence may help us recognize things that have been around us all along. If you want a more in-depth video about Chris Bledsoe, his experiences, or the other phenomena and orbs he interacts with, tell me in the comments. I think it would be fascinating, and I would gladly continue. Thank you for watching with Wormhole to Cosmos. Please subscribe and give us a thumbs up, it really helps. Remember, the universe is vast, mysterious, and full of wonders waiting to be explored. Stay curious, keep looking up, and until next time, keep your eyes on the stars.